I've been asked this over and over again, and so I wanted to take a moment to make this video explaining how I believe that not only will Donald Trump stay in office, but he will do so constitutionally. In the United States, a president is elected to office not by the media, but by a body called the Electoral College. So what is the Electoral College? The Electoral College is a unique method for indirectly electing the President of the United States. It was established by Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, and it's been modified by the 12th and 23rd Amendments. The Electoral College consists of a total of 538 members, one for each U.S. Senator and Representative, and 3 additional electors which are provided to the District of Columbia. Each state has a number of electoral votes equal to the combined total of its congressional delegation, and each state legislature is free to determine the method it will use to select its own electors. And this is very important. Remember what I just said, that each state legislature is free to determine the method it will use to select its own electors. Now, the name of the game to get elected president is that you must have a majority of electoral votes, or 270 out of 538, to become president of the United States. Now, normally, all states would select their elector through a popular vote, which is why we vote for president on election day. Now, to understand how all of this is going to work, you have to understand one simple concept. America is not a democracy. We are a republic, and the Electoral College reflects that. So why am I talking about this? Why is this even important? Isn't the election already over and decided? The answer is no. No, it's not over. It's not even close to being over. You see, there are multiple ways to become president of the United States. One of them is through the Electoral College. Another way is through what's called a contingent election, and I'll get into more about that later. But for now, let's focus on the Electoral College. As I sit here making this video, the date is November 28th, 2020. The media has projected that Joe Biden will receive 306 electoral votes and that Donald Trump will receive 232. As far as they're concerned, the race is over. At least that is what Joe Biden and the media would have you believe. Biden has even gone so far as to create something called the Office of the President-elect, something that actually doesn't exist. You see, the election for president hasn't actually happened yet, and it won't happen for another 16 days. On December 14th, 2020, state legislatures will send their electors to the Electoral College, and it is then, and only then, when a vote will be held to decide our next president. But there's been a monkey wrench thrown in the works. There have been credible accusations of fraud leveled against the Biden campaign, and as such, lawsuits have been filed in multiple states. As of yesterday, November 27th, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is currently trying to take their power from the Secretary of State and instead choose for themselves who they will send to represent their 20 electoral votes. Other states such as Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan are all in the middle of lawsuits. More than likely, all of these cases will end up in front of the Supreme Court in one form or another. So what does this mean? In a word, chaos. Now, based on the fact that there are serious doubts about the legitimacy of this election, it is perfectly conceivable that some states decide to choose for themselves who they think is the rightful winner of the election, meaning the state legislative bodies will meet, and they, not the popular vote, will choose the electors who will then go on to vote in the Electoral College and thus re-elect President Trump to a second term. But in order to pull this off, Trump would need a few state legislative bodies that are currently under Republican control. And wouldn't you know, we've got 8 huge swing states that are currently controlled by Republicans. And they are Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio, which the president already has. He already won them in this election. But what about the other 5, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked, because those states are Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Are you starting to sense a theme here? Let's go back to the map right now of where it stands currently with the election. This is the electoral map for 2020. Currently, Biden has a projected number of delegates of 306 to 232 votes in the Electoral College. That means that if the Electoral College was held today, and everything held, that means that Joe Biden would be president of the United States. But let's assume, just for a moment, that 1 or 2 of the states that I just listed flips for Donald Trump. Well, guess what? Trump already holds Florida, he already holds North Carolina, and he already holds Ohio. But what happens if the state of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona flip? That takes Joe Biden well below the necessary 270 electoral votes to become president. Donald Trump, without those, would sit at 232. Let's assume they flip Republican. Watch what happens. Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Donald Trump has now won the Electoral College. All it takes is one state. I'm going to predict it will be Pennsylvania or Georgia to flip, and the rest will follow. Now let's look and see what happens if all 8 states flip to the president. Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan. Look what we got now. 305 to 233. It is a decisive blowout. And everything I'm talking about is 100% constitutional. But let's assume that Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona decide that they are not going to flip their votes for Donald Trump. Instead, they're not going to send electors at all. That puts Joe Biden at 233 and Donald Trump at 232, both well below the necessary votes needed to become president of the United States. Well, what happens next? Well, I'm glad you asked, because what happens next is going to piss a lot of people off. What happens next is this election goes to the House of Representatives and to the Senate. This is what is known as a contingent election. Now, a contingent election has only occurred 3 times in American history, in 1801, 1825, and 1837. So when the media inevitably tries to say that this is unprecedented, unconstitutional, tyrannical, or whatever little description they want to call it, just laugh at them, because they're wrong, like they usually are about everything. Now, some people think that if this election goes into the House of Representatives, that means Joe Biden wins. Well, not so fast. You see, the vote in the House is not based on a majority of members. Nope. It's based on a majority of state delegations. And currently, Republicans control 26 delegations, Democrats control 23 delegations, and only Pennsylvania is considered a toss-up. And here's another little trick. Each state's House delegation would get a single vote, meaning California's vote would be equal to Kansas, Oklahoma's would be equal to New York, and so on and so forth. But here's the kicker. While Washington, D.C. does get electoral votes, they do not get a say in this process, meaning they don't get to choose when this goes to the House of Representatives. This is another reason why the Democrats are so hell-bent on making Washington, D.C. a state. But that's not important right now. What's important is that the president would need a majority of House delegations to vote in his favor. That would mean 26 out of the 50 states would have to vote for Donald Trump. And wouldn't you know, Republicans control exactly 26 out of the 50 states, thus guaranteeing Donald Trump a second term in office. And if you thought liberals were pissed off when Donald Trump won the first time, you ain't seen nothing yet. So you ask me, what are the odds that this is going to happen, that Donald Trump will have a second term? And my response is 98.5%, because we control the Supreme Court, we control the Senate, and we control the state legislative bodies. In every scenario, Donald Trump wins a second term. Suck on that one, lefties.